Hello.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello. Hello.
Hey, Emil, how are you?
All right, let me start sharing. Let's wait maybe until 3 past to see if anyone else is joining today. And then we can get started. Feel free to sign in if you'd like to in the meanwhile. Just sharing a link to the notes. And as usual, the meeting is being recorded. Right, it's 3 past, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to the CDEvents working group. My name is Andrea Frittoli, I work for IBM, I'm in GNT. So we have a few things on the agenda for today, so let's get started. First, I've sent the link to the roadmap. Someone added, should we use the GitHub roadmap view?
Yeah, I saw it was released just a week ago or something from GitHub. So a new view in the project part of a GitHub project, let's say, which might be useful to see the burn down or whatever we call it for certain release. I haven't used it myself. I just saw the note about it. So
yeah, I mean, it looks interesting. We can experiment with it for sure.
Yep.
Are you interested in attempting or playing with
yeah,
that?
I could maybe try that. Sure.
I don't think it would be anything urgent, but for sure it's something that it looks visually nice, at least, and it might help us staying on top of things. All right. Anything else on that? Oh, okay. I did not see any specific action item from last week. Oh, maybe there was this one to create an issue.
Oh yeah, right. I don't remember if I did. Let me check that and comment on it afterwards.
And we
Okay.
also had I think the meeting last week, right, for the GitHub RFC for Spinnaker. That was an action item. I don't think it was for last week, but it was a week prior. It just took me a little bit to set up that meeting. And then what else? Yeah, I haven't heard too much from Jolander about it, about actually addressing the feedback that we had, but yeah, we did have that meeting. It went pretty well.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Ben. I don't know. Do you want to say a couple of words about?
Yeah, to give a
that
quick
meeting?
summary. Yeah. So we had a meeting to integrate or start thinking about the integration of CDEvents within Spinnaker. If you guys aren't familiar with what Spinnaker is, it is a continuous deployment service. And Jolander, who is also part of the CDEvents, was writing a spec, an RFC that me and a few others at Spinnaker were reviewing, and we decided to have a meeting to kind of get an idea or to kind of drive what we were expecting from the RFC, because it felt like there was a little bit of talking and things kind of like going past one another. So we kind of cleared everything up and we simplified it rather than being this massive RFC where we need to introduce this idea of event bus. It's going to be limited to an event type called a CDEvent type that's going to live in one of the, or that needs to be defined in one of the services, which that service is called Echo. But the CDEvent type would be able to ingest any whatever CDEvent and then do the appropriate action. So that's what kind of came out of that meeting. As before, it was kind of the RFC didn't really talk about how things were going to be integrated within Spinnaker. So this was a huge step. So we're just waiting for that RFC to be updated. And once it is updated, we should be able to start, you know, I can get that ball rolling to get that merged. And then we can start looking at actually implementing, which will be a pretty big win for both CDEvents and Spinnaker. So I'll find you the link to put in there.
Thanks, Ben. Did we try to remember? Did we agree on generating events?
I'm sorry,
Robert.
I just had a quick question about that. Hey, Ben, quick question for you. What does that do for Spinnaker users? I'm playing kind of Columbo dumb here. I think I know the answer to this, but I wanted to understand, what does that do for Spinnaker users?
So users, like when you say users, are you saying the users like the developers, or are you saying the users, the people that actually use Spinnaker to deploy software? Like which users are we talking about?
Well, it's actually both. I mean, they're both stakeholders in Spinnaker, right? And but I imagine it's probably the Spinnaker administrators that are really interested in that.
Right. Okay, so kind of give so yeah, really two questions here for each party. So I'll go with the first one, which is the end Spinnaker users, the guys that are deploying the software, because I feel like it's probably going to be a little bit more transparent there. But the main benefit there is that they can plug in any system in their ecosystem that uses CDEvents to be ingested by Spinnaker. So if they have some CI system, for example, that uses CDEvents, it would be able to send it to Spinnaker and just be able to use it. And, you know, which is kind of the same benefit for the actual administrators or the maintainers, is that we now, or Spinnaker is now able to talk to, or the goal is to be able to talk to more systems without much more effort. Is the end goal there. So if we get CDEvents into things like, you know, like other, like Jenkins, for example, GitHub, we don't have, Spinnaker maintainers don't have to do anything. It's just automatically supported by this new endpoint that supports CDEvents. So that's the end goal, is being able to not really have to add a new layer for every new service that wants to be able to talk to Spinnaker. So that's kind of like what it comes down to. Because right now, if I don't know if you're familiar with the Spinnaker code base, there's a GitHub type, there's a Kubernetes type, there's a Jenkins type, you know, so there's all these different types, but the goal is kind of like have all these different stakeholders or these CI systems talk the same language for Spinnaker to be able to be able to do what it needs to do. So that's kind of the goal for both fronts there.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So this will be Spinnaker listening for CDEvents and then doing a thing. Okay. So that presupposes or requires that you mentioned GitHub, I assume GitHub Actions and Jenkins sending CDEvents messages, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Makes perfect sense. I can very much appreciate the Bob Metcalf, what was it? The Metcalf law? It was N/X or something like that. Something about the number of devices on a network. The more things that are talking to each other, the more valuable the network, basically.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Makes perfect sense. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.
But also the other way around, right? That the people using Spinnaker could also send CDEvents through some actions in Spinnaker, right? When they create their pipelines or their
So this RFC is we decided to make it a lot smaller as a first step. So this is just going to be Spinnaker ingesting. And then once that gets approval, because I'd rather work in chunks first rather than try to submit this whole RFC where people are trying to poke and delve with ideas. I'd rather get this part right and then expand on it. So that's kind of the starting point. And then yes, Emil, you're absolutely right. The goal is eventually to have CDEvents across all the microservices within Spinnaker, where they're able to do all these they can plug in whatever microservice that they want, or use whatever pipeline orchestrator that they need, and be able to do the things that they need to do. But yeah, I feel like that's a little bit longer in the future. So I wanted to start small, and so that's kind of the plan.
Yeah, build momentum, get a quick win.
Yep.
Hey, so Jenkins, I heard from another CDF meeting, that there is a Jenkins plugin for CDEvents. Is that true?
There is a Jenkins plugin for cloud events, not for CDEvents, but there is an interest from end user, from Fidelity. Fidelity Investment is they use Jenkins and they use events, so they are interested in adopting CDEvents and possibly contributing a CDEvents plugin. So I need to think with Jer on that. And one thing that we were discussing as well, since there is a Jenkins submitted an application to be a mentor organization for GSOC. So the deadline is still open to submit project ideas for Jenkins. So one possibility could be to have the implementation of such plugin as a GSOC project. And then of course we would need mentors for that. So one possibility is, of course, is of course that we could, we could have someone from our team, but if Fidelity is interested in this, maybe they could be interested in mentoring as well.
Roger that. So that sounds like, Ben, that would solve your problem with your Spinnaker implementation, where you could say, okay, Spinnaker implements the ingestion, and then over, Fidelity, GSOC, whoever works on Jenkins sending the messages. That would be a value.
Right. It would, yes.
Would you be able to, would you like talking about it when it happens?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm interested in anything, that we can expand to make it useful for Spinnaker, and other CI tooling. I'm all about it. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Roger that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm just finishing the notes.
So is there some discussion in the Tecton community there, Andrea, on supporting CDEvents? No.
And not yet, but it's on my to-do list.
Yeah, but I was thinking if someone else has lifted it as well. Yeah, but not. Yeah, it's from you so far.
Yeah, since I'm in both communities, I definitely will try that. Right now, the main limitation is really to have someone to implement it. So I brought the discussion up some time ago and said that it would be interesting to implement CDEvents, and the feedback was positive at the time. So I don't think I would not expect any, pushing back on this. But yeah, it's mainly a matter of having someone focusing on implementing that feature, which I really would like it to be me, since I've done quite some work around that area of eventing in Tecton. But right now I find myself a bit short in time. But yeah, I'll look for ways either to implement it myself or to find someone who could help. I mean, I used to work on that with VBAV, but I don't think right now VBAV has time to continue working on that. So.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll add some more notes later on. Okay, well, this was great. So definitely, things going on for the different projects. Just to complete the list, for Jenkins, there was some interest expressed in implementing CDEvents as well. But yeah, I've not heard anything since Jenkins also relies on Tecton. There might be a dependency, not necessarily, but I think there could be a dependency to the implementation on Tecton side, or we could collaborate. So that's something we could do. Maybe some way we could find someone to work on this.
There is actually in the project ideas for GSOC for Jenkins X, I see a proposal to integrate CDEvents with Jenkins X.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah. So I can place it in the chat here.
Yeah, sure. So Jenkins X.
Someone has added that. I don't know. Brad. Oh, Brad McCoy did. Yeah, good.
All right, interesting. So Jenkins X is also a mentoring organization.
Seems so, and Brad McCoy seems to be the mentor for it in this proposal.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to get something more from Brad then on this. So that would be great. All right. Anything else on projects and CDEvents? Okay, so the next item I had on the agenda is the test events PR. I don't see our Cube test colleagues in the meeting here today. But basically, to provide some update, there is a new version of the PR from Ole. I hope that's the right pronunciation of his name. So I did a review. Sorry. So I did an initial review, and I think the data model, the model that they are proposing there looks okay to me. I need to have a deeper look into the JSON schemas.
One thing that kind of sticks out to me is the word abort. I'm usually like used to the word cancel as opposed to abort, but the reason why I say this is because we probably want to be consistent in the verb usages that we use. So if we do decide to go with abort, we probably want to make sure that anywhere that we have like pending or canceling or, things that are synonymous with that word, we probably should make sure they're all the same.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ben. Would you?
Yeah, I can add a comment.
Mind adding a comment on that? Yeah, I'm all for consistency, so that's
Totally.
yeah. But basically, if anyone else has interest in reviewing it, I did more comments. So hopefully we can make progress on these as well offline, and maybe be ready for the next meeting. And I know the TestCube guys are interested in implementing the SDK side of things, at least for Go. So, which is great. So this is not particularly in scope for our next release, but I mean, if we can get it in the next release or in the following one, it would be great, I think. I don't know if anyone has any comment on this. Okay. Next thing, this is part of the planned features for the next release, is the incident events. So yeah, made a new version of the PR, including the feedback from that we discussed previously. Yeah, I think there is some rewording that I still need to address here in this chapter based on your feedback, Emil.
Yeah, I didn't read your last comment there. Maybe you handled it there. So we talked about how to associate one or multiple detected events with maybe one reported or one resolved event.
Yeah. So I included here sentence multiple events may be associated to the same incident, as well as its resolution coming from different sources. But I think this is maybe too vague. So should be more explicit about what the subject ID looks for this multiple events to make it more clear. And sorry, I got a bit of a cold. I think yeah, you make a great point, Emil, that we need to. It would be great to have the ability to somehow connect this multiple events associated to incident at CDEvents level, not only as enough to vote or something that is done on top of CDEvents data. And so this goes back, I guess, to the connecting events discussion. I don't know that this is something that we need to solve in this first iteration of the incident events. My proposal would be for now to just make this paragraph more specific. And then we can improve on the incident events, add more, yeah, or improve on the data model when we have some agreement on the connecting events discussion.
Yes, so if we should describe the scenario where the multiple events are associated, we probably should have some kind of recommendation of how to note it in the events as well, how to declare it in the events if there are multiple such events. Or if we don't support it in this first release, maybe that could be the case as well.
Yeah, I think in this release, I mean, depending on what we get in terms of connecting events, but in this first iteration of these incident events, we could say, I mean, there could be multiple sources generating events, which turns out to be associated to the same incident. But for now, we don't have knowledge in CDEvents about that. So the only way you can associate events is that you can have a reported event which links to the same ticket. That's a way you could associate them together, but it's indirect.
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I can update this paragraph to say that. And yeah, apart from that, I mean, I've done a few extra things in this PR, which I think would be good to then reuse and extend in the rest of the events. So in the schemas, I started using the ERI reference format in the JSON schema, like we discussed. And we have the type within the content. I said because it takes a specific value, I started setting it through an enum with a default value. And that's something that we should extend to the other events, I believe, because we expect a specific value there and it is not set today in the schema, it's only set in the SDKs. Yeah, I think these are the two things I added in the schema. And the other thing that I added is this examples folder, where basically provide one full example for every event type. Based on some feedback as well, we got that it would be useful to have more examples of CDEvents. And yeah, I think it would be useful indeed, and this can be used both for documentation, but it also, we could then build some tools that basically exercises the SDKs and make sure that the SDK is able to produce this examples that we have in the spec repo. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So
again, once you've updated the latest parts. So.
Okay, so I'll probably update pretty soon this paragraph as we discussed, and hopefully we can then move on with a PR, and then the next step would be to for me to implement this on the SDK side, so that we are able to produce these in at least for the Go SDK.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So next topic. I mean. As the connecting events discussion. So I just wanted to open this and have a quick chat about it, if that makes sense. It's still not complete. I started adding a little bit to some to the workflow data alternative, and basically wanted to go through it and just present what I've been trying to do here. So the whole idea, of course, is with connecting events is to give CDEvents user some way of expressing relationships between events. And what I'm trying to introduce here is the concept of a workflow. And you can think of the software life cycle. So starting from the idea to the implementation, deployment, and production, there could be several workflows identified that might intersect and overlap. And so depending on the level of abstraction that you're looking at things, you may see different workflows. So you can have a CI/CD workflow that starts from a change and go through test and build and deployment, but you might have a different workflow, a more extended one that starts from the business idea, or we could cut your data in different ways. And so that the consequence of this is that a single event may belong to multiple workflows. And what can we do in CDEvents to allow users to store workflow relevant data and identify workflows across CDEvents? And motivation why we have this is today we have a subject and predicates, but this is not necessarily enough there's not enough information to identify these workflows in a nutshell. And goals would be basically specify what are the changes required to context subjects and bindings, describe workflows in the primer, identify type of workflows that we want to support. So what are the use cases that we want to address for this connecting events, and include examples. Non-goals would be to develop an optimal event selection logic or to support centralized workflows orchestrator like Captain. So not a direct goal. So I got some use cases and requirements. A workflow may span multiple tools. A workflow is not limited in time. If a producer includes event receiving capabilities, the event received must provide enough information to produce new events that propagate existing workflows. And an event may belong to multiple workflows, and workflows may fan in and fan out. And related work is the activity linking from Eiffel, of course, and also include the distributed tracing over cloud events. Maybe something that we could reuse. And so I think there are a few alternatives. There are a few ways we could address this. The first alternative is to reuse something like trace context. So trace context is a W3C recommendation that defines ways to propagate a trace over HTTP. And there are specific headers defined for cloud events to do that. And so we could reuse something like a trace for CDEvents. The disadvantage is that this would not support like having events belonging to multiple workflows or so there are some limitation there. And the other limitation that I have not written down yet is that basically this would rely heavily on the cloud events binding. So it will be undefined. What happens when we move to other kind of bandings? A second alternative that I started thinking about is to add something similar to the trace context, maybe like a list of workflow IDs or global IDs, or we could call them anything that we want. I mean, workflow is just one term I picked, but again, the idea with these IDs would be that if an event producer receives events that contain workflow IDs, then it must include them in the outgoing messages. And we could have a concept of also a semantic associated to this to specify what is the relationship between input and output, or we could just have like a plain list.
Yeah, I believe some kind of semantics would be necessary there if there are multiple workflows of different types. So we need to understand what type of workflow is this ID coming from and so on, maybe, to be able to make sense of the connection there.
Yeah, and also in addition to that, one thing that I think that would be nice to have is potentially having the things that you want to support, like the fan in, fan out type of use cases, and what the end result is expected. So if we fan out and we fan in, what does the CD event that's being received, what does that look like? What I mean by that is, like, does it have all the things that fanned out? Like, what does the fan out look like? You know, does it all contain IDs as well? So I'm just kind of curious, like, what the end goal for the individual use cases, like what we expect them to look like. Which I think is kind of related to what EMEA was talking about in some kind of different way.
Yeah, maybe it's a specific use case for fan in, fan out, when we also need them to have semantics to understand.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think in a way this is similar to the, or it goes a little bit towards the Eiffel links concept. The main difference here is that the link is not to an event ID, rather to a third kind of ID, which is this new workflow ID. So that is kind of shared knowledge across the tools. So that means that the tools may decide then to start a new workflow by generating an ID if there is none, or it might also start a new workflow even if there is already a workflow, but wants to start an additional one. Or if I'm a tool and I'm receiving events from multiple sources and I want to generate a single event, I could include all the workflows IDs in there. But yeah, so the reference is not to the event ID as it is in the case of Eiffel.
So I failed to understand a bit the difference between workflow ID and the trace ID above there. What was the difference really? So there was trace ID cannot span multiple workflows, but isn't it in effect the trace ID but on a higher level then, or?
Yes, I think it is. It is basically the
like
similar to the
trace IDs or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's moved into the CDEvents context in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that I might do, Andrea, is maybe post some images of like, this is a request going in and being fanned out. What do we expect when things fan in to look like, and just get some discussion around that, because I'm kind of curious, like what we're thinking the end result of the fanning in portion is going to look like.
Right. I mean, for an example of fan in, I think we had some presentation from the SAS folks presenting how they use events today, and they had, basically they have one piece of software that they use to orchestrate events, and it allows them to express policies that go across events. So let's say if I received an event about I don't know, a certain piece of code being merged, and also I received an event about a test being executed successfully, and I received an event about an artifact being signed. Once I receive these 3 events, then I can go on to the next step in my workflow, which is maybe to deploy that artifact to a staging environment. And so this is a use case of an example of, fan in, where you get multiple events and they are kind of collected by this orchestration software that will then generate an event saying, okay, yeah, we did a deployment, and this event will be associated to the 3 events that were considered as input to start the deployment.
Okay, interesting. So they're going to be waiting for 3 events. Okay, yeah, I'll have to think about it, because it's kind of an interesting use case, because I'm just wondering, like, again, like how CDEvents is going to work with that. But yeah.
Another thing would be if you would split a pipeline execution with multiple parallel task runs, for example. That's a fan out scenario where you split the execution in multiple parallel things, and then eventually you would get that into one chain again, probably before you release something. So then you have it both fan in and fan out in the same flow there. And obviously you will need to wait for all those parallel activities to finish before you can continue the pipeline, and then you have that scenario as well. If you have an event-driven CI/CD system, then you will need to wait for those events to come in.
Okay, and one characteristic of this approach is that it relies on 1 or more events which are available locally to the producer, and their global IDs, but it does not require to have access to a database, like, let's say, of all the event with their IDs. The last case is that we use event links, similar to what iFlow does. So instead of including a global ID that we receive from our incoming messages, we include the ID of the incoming message into the outgoing message and associate semantics to it. So it's very similar. It requires the event IDs. Of course, it only requires the IDs of the events that are associated with the outgoing event. So in terms of context, it's also similar to the previous case. So it would be interesting to better understand what are the differences and advantages and disadvantages between the two approaches. So I don't know if you, Emil, Ben, Robert, have any context or any further ideas on this. It would be great to include them in this document.
Yeah, I hope you write something there about the links, what that would mean compared to the other ones there.
Okay, yeah, that'd be really helpful because like I'm very familiar with how tracing works with its trace ID, span IDs and whatnot, but I don't have too much context on Eiffel, which I know you've worked on quite a bit, Emil. So yeah, I can, once you write that portion, I can read it and kind of think about some pros and cons between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry, I'm muted and talking to myself. So there is a link to activity linking in Eiffel. That's also some related work if you want to start looking at that, Ben. It already provides some good context about this. But yeah.
Cool. I'll take a look.
So sorry. I would really like for us to be able to decide, at least for a minimal approach step forward on this. It could even be that we support both approaches eventually if we see that it's needed. But yeah, exactly. I would prefer one if we see that one does not work for all the use cases, and we definitely need to have more than one. We could consider it, but yeah, I would. But I would prefer. Yeah,
I was gonna say let's say next SIG meeting, we'll have Emil write his section on with Eiffel. We can then discuss the two different implementations and designs, and then the following SIG meeting we can make a final decision. I think that's an adequate amount of time between choosing the two, and it'll give me enough time to read up on Eiffel as well as look at Emil's notes and his explanations, if that works for you, Andrea and Emil.
Yeah, I hope I will be able to provide that in the needed time frame. I can just note that for Eiffel, the main way to connect events is using these links, but then there are also some kind of context IDs there as well. So I mean, we have the in some of the events, at least, we use contexts. We don't call it context, but anyway, as well to relate to other objects or subjects, if we should use that terminology. But the main way to reference events is through links. Yeah, that's correct. And I will try to explain a bit about that in this document as well.
Cool. So what do you think, Andrea? So like within 2 SIG meetings from now, we'll actually have a choice on trace context versus Eiffel's links proposal, and go that route. I'd rather have like a good deadline, because like I don't like saying, like, oh, we need to make a choice, and then 4 weeks comes out and we still haven't made a choice. So I like to at least have a deadline so we can kind of at least shoot for it. So that's kind of like why I'm proposing it. But if you guys don't want to work that way, I'm completely fine. But that's like usually how I see, or that's what I've used in the past, and it's worked pretty well for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it works for me. I think we have this open discussion for quite some time now, and I would really like for us to proceed and take at least an initial decision so we can start experimenting with it, building some POCs, integrating into some tools, and and if we find out that unfortunately we took the wrong direction, we can change, but we need to make a decision to be able to start and
I believe for experimenting, it would be possible to use our custom data, right? It's called that object in the events. I mean, we could include something that you call a link or something, or a workflow ID in the custom data section, and thereby try it out if you would have some SDK that supports that custom data. It would of course be optional to use, and we shouldn't expect consumers to understand it since it's custom. But if we want to play around with it, I mean, if you have a CD event, you can just add whatever custom data you would like there to play around with it.
Yeah, that's true. And indeed, I mean, we could decide that we want to start with a certain approach, and we could include it in the custom data to begin with, and have some support, maybe some experimental feature in the SDK that allows you to use it through the SDK, but it actually lands into the custom data.
Could be so, yeah.
And then Emil, real quick, you said that there is a context ID in Eiffel links, but you said it wasn't called that. What is it called? So I can like kind of like make sure I look out for that.
I think I need to look it up myself, honestly.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Just ping me after Slack if you find it, and that'll be more than sufficient.
I was trying to find an example of it, but I couldn't at the moment. But I'm pretty sure that we have kind of contexts.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I'll see if I find it and get back to you.
Cool, thank you.
All right, that's great. I'll also try to add some more to this document as I have some more ideas, but so let's see. Just take notes, proposed plan. Next meeting or further notes from this explanation. Okay.
So when we say next meeting and 2 meetings and so on, do we mean the Europe, Asia, the friendly meeting next week as the next one, or do we mean with the one in 2 weeks? It's the next one. What's your intention there then on your comment?
Oh, I meant these meetings because I don't attend those Europe,
right.
The Europe one, just because it's way early for me. But
yeah, I know. So you mean in 2 weeks and then in next 2 weeks? So in 4 weeks from now it will be a decision more or less.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I understand. And we will of course discuss that, I guess, in the other.
But if we want to expedite this and make it for the next SIG meeting and then make it the following meeting, I can make it. I can, make sure that I attend that meeting, but I can't attend that meeting basically like every single way. It's gonna destroy my sleep schedule. But if we do want to expedite this, I'm totally okay with doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for 4 weeks is kind of a longer time again to.
Okay, let's do the 2 weeks then. Let's do the following SIG meeting and then the next week SIG meeting. So 2 weeks from now. Does that work for Emil and Andre? I know I'm pointing out Emil because he actually has to write the section, so that's why I'm wondering. It's more contingent on him than anything else, but wanted him to at least be able to say that's enough time.
So then you mean the ordinary SIG meeting that we have on Monday, where we will.
Right.
I mean, we have already for that meeting we have planned a presentation, I believe, from CubeShop on these testing events and their way to use those events. So we will not have such a in-depth vocabulary or CDEvents discussion on that meeting. It will be more on, so to say, SIG level on events in general, probably. But we could maybe touch upon it a bit, but not too much, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So
Yeah. I
it's
mean, as
mostly
long
on
as we
these
spend like
CDEvents
5
workshop
minutes.
meetings where we discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as long as we have like a little bit of time, like 5 minutes to talk about it, to give a quick brief update on what you've written, Emil, that's more than enough. And then the following week, we can then make a decision. Does that sound good?
We'll try that. Yeah. See
Okay,
if it's
perfect.
it
All right,
yeah.
I'll adjust my calendar then.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. That's great. Let's try at least, and let's see how it goes. Hopefully
Yep.
we can get some progress on this. All right. We have 4 minutes left. So in terms of SDK updates, yeah, we don't have anyone from Java or Python SDKs here. So I know that the Java SDK PR is progressing, but it's still open. And I don't know if anyone has any other information about that.
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah, for the Golang SDK, there is no update right now. As soon as we get some progress on incidents and test events, I was planning on updating that accordingly. And yeah, so Python SDK, I guess we still waiting for Eric to let us know if there is any progress on that. All right. Yeah, that's all we had on the agenda for today. Any last remark?
No, I think we actually wrote quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it was great. So I'm really happy to see us doing good progress in every working group. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks Robert for joining us today. And
thank you.
Good to see everyone. Until next time.
Yeah.
Have a good one, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.